Hello, and welcome to the Dance Physio Podcast, a podcast designed to explore ideas and foster discussion around dancer health and wellness. We're here to challenge the status quo, bridge the gap between dance science and the studio, and help change the landscape of the dance industry for the better. I'm your host, Erica Mayall, a dancer turned physiotherapist who is deeply passionate about leaving the dance world better than I found it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dance Physio Podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited for today's episode because not only do we have a guest on for today's episode, but this guest is one of my former teachers. So I'm really excited to sit down with her. She was a teacher of mine back when I was a teenager and then became a huge mentor of mine when I first started getting into dance physiotherapy specifically. And my first clinic or my first clinical experience was actually based out of a dance school that she was running. So we worked really collaboratively together for years in terms of developing and executing dance wellness programs within a studio setting. So I'm so excited that she agreed to be on the podcast today. So the guest today is Astrid Sherman, and she is currently the Imperial Society of Teachers of Dancing, so ISTD International Representative for the Americas. And she also guest teaches all over the world in Los Angeles, in Vancouver, in Spain, all sorts of places. After dancing professionally with the Natal Performing Arts Council in South Africa, she immigrated to Canada. There, she was artistic director of a large ISTD-based professional training school in Vancouver for 16 years. And many of her graduates were accepted into companies and prestigious postgraduate training programs internationally. There are still graduates that Astrid has who are out there dancing on Broadway, who are choreographing for international companies, doing all sorts of things in the professional world, which is really cool to see. Astrid has a fellowship teaching qualification from the ISTD in Imperial Classical Ballet. She also has a BSc focused in Kinesiology and Gerontology from SFU in Canada, and her MA in Dance Pedagogy from Middlesex University in the UK. One of the things I love most about Astrid is she always is like seeking out knowledge and learning and just like expanding her repertoire and just never stops learning. She is also on the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science Dance Educators Committee, where she's very involved in organizing a lot of regional and outreach virtual dance science events. So if you've ever attended any of those IADMS events, probably the person behind the scenes was Astrid. She has also presented dance research at many IADMS and Healthy Dancer Canada conferences. We've actually co-presented quite a lot of things over the years. I think our very first IADMS presentation was back in 2010, maybe. Anyway, it was a while ago. So she's presented all over the place, and she's also published in the Journal of Dance Medicine and Science. And last but certainly not least, she acts as the Dancer Wellness Advisor for Ballet Beyond Borders. So welcome to the podcast, Astrid, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Erica. Such an honor. I'm just so proud of you, and so wonderful when a student carries that love and takes it forward. And I love the way you're still exploring, and your practice is growing, and how much you helped my dancers stay injury-free. It was such a wonderful working situation. Erica had her practice actually in my studio, and it was so wonderful to be able to go to say to a student, quickly run to Miss Erica and just see, if she can book an appointment for later today. That was simply fantastic to have that working situation. Was marvelous for me, and the dancers were so lucky. So thank you for having me, Erica.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here. And we are going to dive into talking a lot about sort of your work with the ISTD, but more generally than that, just kind of the sort of syllabus approach to dance training. I think I've talked on the podcast previously about how I grew up in an ISTD studio as well and did not really participate a ton in competitions, a little bit here and there, but that certainly wasn't the main focus. We were very much kind of a syllabus and exam-based studio. And so we are going to get into that. But before we dive into sort of the meat of talking about those types of things, I would just love to know what your earliest memories of dance are, or how you kind of fell in love with dance back when you were little.
Well, interestingly, I come from a family of all girls, and I'm the middle one of 5 girls. But my 2 elder sisters, the eldest sister did ballet, and then the second sister did gymnastics. So I was put in, because my mom was driving to these places, I was put in ballet and gymnastics. And I very soon gave up on the ballet because I took one look at my elder sister's bleeding toes from her point shoes and went, I'm not doing that, and pursued the gymnastics until I reached a stage where they took one look at me and went, you're not made for gym, you're made for ballet. And so eventually I found my way back into first I took modern and tap, and then took ballet again in my teenage years to help my modern and tap, and fell in love with ballet just because it's so, I loved the mind-body connection that ballet offered me. I just immediately zoomed into that, and it just fitted me, and the rest is history.
Amazing. I love that story. So kind of jumping well ahead to the work that you're doing now with the ISTD, can you maybe just tell us a little bit about how you got into the position that you're in right now and what that entails, and maybe just a little bit about like ISTD in general, or just kind of what that even is? I think some of our listeners are going to be familiar with sort of the syllabus systems and whether that's ISTD or CHECEDI or RAD or this various syllabus, but some of our listeners are probably not familiar with what those even are if they come from like a more competitive dance background.
Yeah, so I'll get into it later, but I actually trained in the RAD. But when I arrived in Canada, the school that I was teaching at, your school, was an ISTD school. And so because I was there, I took my teaching certification through the ISTD. I actually did modern, tap, and ballet. And that's the difference between the ISTD and many of the other ballet syllabi, is the ISTD is a huge umbrella organization, and they have multiple dance genres under their governing body. So there is Imperial Classical Ballet, which I did. There is modern theater. There is tap. There is street dance, there's Latin and ballroom, there's contemporary, there's classical Indian, which is beautiful. There is, believe it or not, there's also, I think, disco. So there's a multitude of different genres under this one governing body, which is wonderful as a teacher. It gives you such a diversity of courses and options. It just increases your breadth of exploring dance. So I, after a couple of years of teaching at a studio, I opened my own school with a friend and colleague, and we offered the ISTD as both of us had done our teaching qualifications under the ISTD. I did ballet and she did the modern and tap. And that went for 16 years. And then I got the opportunity to move to LA with a new husband. And because I was then in the USA, the ISTD timing, sometimes the universe just throws things at you timing-wise. The ISTD was looking for somebody who understood, dance training is a little bit different in Canada versus the USA. And obviously Mexico is another whole country with their own unique way of teaching and how they approach teaching. And so they were looking for somebody who had experience in more than one of the countries in the Americas. And I was lucky enough to get that position. And it also came at a time when I was slowing down in my teaching, and I could use my skills that I had, plus all my dance science knowledge, working with teachers, helping teachers. I've been doing a lot of helping teachers with their qualifications. And so that all gathered together into, I suppose, why I was the lucky one to get that position.
Amazing. And so the position that you have right now, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of really based on outreach and really connecting opportunities for teachers and sort of letting them know about like what ISTD has to offer. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's more about reaching out to all the teachers, letting them know what's happening within the society, what they need from the society, exploring new things with these teachers that the society is offering, letting the society know how different countries are responding, what they need, because every country is its own little niche. And so the ISTD actually has another international representative in Australia, New Zealand. They have one in Eurasia and one in Africa, Middle East, and somebody in Europe. Because what's right in programming in England doesn't necessarily always translate internationally. Each one of us is so unique. And so I've really grown a lot because I have meetings with these wonderful dance educators from around the world, and it's so fascinating to hear how every country's problems are the same but different, and different countries enjoy different dance genres more than others. And actually, an interesting thing about different countries is how dance examinations have different importance and are valued in different countries. It's not all like England. And so it's been very interesting for me listening to my peers from South Africa, where dance exams are very important and held in high prestige and seen as very necessary, to in Malaysia, they are, but not as dear as in the Commonwealth countries. USA dance examinations are only offered where the schools are actually run by English teachers or people who came from England. Canada, more ballet examinations than anything else. Mexico really enjoy their dance examinations. They're really passionate about qualifications. And so, especially now that the ISTD is getting their qualifications certified. So Ofqual, which is a governing body, a government governing body for all educational institutions and businesses, they have certain standards that are needed to be met, and all the ISTD examinations are now regulated under Ofqual, which means that it's actually a wonderful thing, is that students get academic credit and actually university recognition from these regulated qualifications. Obviously, in Canada and in the USA, and mostly internationally, I think in the EU, some countries do recognize these Ofqual credits as well. We still do, ours are unregulated. They're not, you can't take your report to your local school and get academic accreditation. But because some of the exams are regulated, it does mean when you take your certification anywhere, there's a little bit more sense of its value. So it gives an additional value to your examination than if it's just given by the society alone. So the ISTD examinations for students are all Ofqual regulated. And so that certification is a little bit more weighted than if it's not under another governing body like Ofqual. Now, the RAD is also, so any of those major, the bigger examination bodies that work in England have had to go through this Ofqual regulating system. They've had to have all their examinations looked at, and so that everything has been evened out, actually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the previous podcast episodes I did recently was about sort of regulation or lack thereof in the dance industry. And so this is a piece that ties into that a little bit, because although overall the industry is still fairly unregulated, there are sectors of it. And in that podcast episode, I talked a bit about like the difference between certifications and like general regulation. So having like a government run governing body or that sort of thing. And so although there is in most parts of the world not necessarily regulation within the dance world, there are definitely these certifications and certifying bodies that in some parts of the world are more regulated than others. So that's a really interesting point. And I guess also maybe just to back things up even a tiny bit more, because I think we are both maybe working off the assumption that people kind of understand what these syllabi systems are, but essentially they are a curriculum that is like a structured teaching curriculum. And so most of them are graded. And so you start with the youngest kids, they might have like a primary kind of level. And then it usually goes by grades, like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, so on. And then the levels go up to what they call the major. So those are often termed like intermediate or advanced or things like that. So there are these curriculum that are followed from like a teaching perspective, but then like Astrid was just saying, there are examinations that are tied to these that sort of allow the students to move from one level to the other. And like she was alluding to, some studios may follow a curriculum, but they may choose not to actually participate in the examinations, and other studios may choose to do the curriculum and the examinations. I'm just curious, because you're so familiar with like the landscape internationally. I know like I grew up in a studio where we did the curriculum and we did the examinations, but we also did a little bit of like competition and sort of festivals and that sort of thing. And then I know when you were running your studio in Vancouver, you did both. So your dancers participated in examinations, but also participated in competitions, and a lot more of like the YAGPs and the bigger international competitions as well. I'm curious, just like regionally, if you notice differences in terms of like if there are places where studios tend to do both, or studios choose to do like one or the other, or kind of what the landscape of that looks like.
Well, definitely in Canada, and it's a beautiful thing, is studios, a lot more studios are doing both examinations and competitions. In the USA, a lot more studios are only doing competitions. And I just feel that if I go into what a syllabus can give a teacher and a student, so a syllabus, following a structured syllabus, is not, it's not the only tool in the teacher's toolbox. It's one of many. But what it does give, it gives a beautiful scaffolding to how you start a student and where they finish. And you know that it's, especially if you follow one of these syllabi that are decades old, you know that it has this generational wealth of knowledge that has been gathered together and passed on and passed on. And not that it's what we're not doing what they did in 1920, it does progress and it's refreshed and it's always re-looked at and put into a modern lens or a lens of today. But you gather this beautiful knowledge of how to safely nurture a little body and what order steps should be taught in, so that you're making sure that there are no gaps, that student learns from the bottom. There's this huge foundation of steps, and then at the top, then you add on some of those beautiful, so I'd call them tricks, but they're the steps and jumps and pirouettes that we all go wow at. And instead, I see, especially in America, that a lot of schools start with the top tier elements and those foundational grounding steps, which are so important because they are your linking steps. They are the steps that develop strength and quality are missing. So you'll often see an 8-year-old learning how to do fouette turns before they've learned how to just actually stand on one leg in a retiré with control, beautiful posture placement. So a lot of steps are missed. So I think that's what a syllabus gives. It gives a teacher, even if you didn't grow up with that syllabus, it gives you this beautiful knowledge of the order and the progression, the developmental progression that is safe, that is secure, and that is going to give you a student at the end with no missing parts. Their knowledge is sound, their command of the classical technique is secure, and they know all the elements of classical ballet. There's no part of ballet that they've missed out on. So I think that's where a syllabus is a wonderful tool in a teacher's toolbox. Not the only tool, and I don't think you should only be doing syllabus classes, because every syllabus obviously is not going to be for every student, and every syllabus out there has some areas that can be strengthened. And so, yes, it's no one syllabus is the best and develops the best students. I think there are many beautiful syllabi out there, but if you follow any one of them, your teaching is going to be so much more secure, and your students are going to have so many less foundational skills that they won't be missing. They'll be stronger.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I see in the clinic too, is the students who seem to train in sort of a more structured syllabus often have more of that foundational knowledge, or have built up a bit more of that foundation versus some other dancers who are still incredible dancers. But if they've kind of gone in with really skill-specific training, which is often what we see with competition, where it's like, okay, you're going to master this one move or this one series of moves. They might be able to master those moves, but they might be missing some of the elements to sort of build up to those skills. It's interesting, though, because just reflecting back, growing up being mostly a syllabus and exam-based dancer, I do feel like we sometimes missed out on performing opportunities, or maybe not missed out, it's not the right word, but there were less performing opportunities. So we had, a show kind of mid-year. It was usually in February, I think, and then a bigger recital at the end of the year. And unless we were doing some sort of a competition or festival, which we may or may not have done on any given year, we didn't necessarily perform as much versus kids nowadays, if they are competing in addition to, or maybe kids that are just competing, they do, I think, get a lot more performance opportunities. So I love that point about sort of the benefits of both, and really the studios who can balance both of those in terms of participating in syllabus, in terms of bringing in that foundational training and potentially offering them exam opportunities, but then also the competitions for more of that performance piece of things where they can really showcase their skills and talents and get to be on stage. Because really at the end of the day, most dancers are dancing because they really want to perform and be on stage and love that part of it. So, I think it's a really interesting point about the benefits of both systems and really like combining both of those.
Most students probably do just want to perform, but you'd be surprised at how many students and dancers, actually, that professional dancers that you talk to, actually fall in love with dance not for the performing. They fall in love with the journey.
The process,
They fall in love with that day-to-day process, that beautiful time in ballet class, and you know what's coming. You know the bar work that's coming. You know the order of the exercises. It's a very secure, safe place to be. And so a lot of dancers actually who go on to professional careers love the process. The performing is just kind of the extra cherry on the top. But
I think you have to love the process, because if you think about the number of hours you spend in the studio for every hour you get to be on stage performing, like you have to enjoy that to some degree. And maybe that's also something that's starting to like shift a bit or sort of transition in the dance world, and especially in some of the studios that maybe only do competition. I know studios really struggled post-COVID to like keep dancers engaged when there weren't the same performing and competing opportunities, that a lot of students saw big like attrition in numbers. And I think some of that was that like a lot of those dancers maybe hadn't learned to embrace the process of being in the studio. So when there was no sort of reward of being on stage or competing and showing off, then they kind of lost interest during that. So it's interesting, just to think about the differences between that. One of the questions that I get commonly from parents mostly, and especially parents who don't come from a dance background and have kids who are participating in dance, is questions about like the differences between the different syllabi. So like we've kind of mentioned a few names, sort of Cicchetti, RAD, ISTD. There are lots more around the world. But parents will often ask kind of, which one is the quote unquote best one, or like what are the advantages of some versus others. And one of the questions I sometimes get asked is, if my dancer's interested in doing, especially like when it comes to ballet, like a specific style of ballet, or they want to get into their dream company is ABT, or they want to do Balanchine, or like those types of things, like what syllabus should they be participating in? Can you speak a bit to that in terms of maybe similarities and differences, or like whether there are syllabus that are attached to certain styles of dance and that kind of thing?
I think that the parents need to seek out a teacher who's a good teacher. I don't think that a syllabus is the key. I think that there are stronger teachers in different syllabi. At the end of the day, good ballet is good ballet. And so it doesn't really matter which training syllabus you come from. At the end of the day, it's, did your teacher develop a classical aesthetic? Do you have good posture? Do you have good placement? Do you have a great command of foundational skills so that your port de bras and your artistry can just float on top of that? Has that port de bras and musicality been developed? Then, obviously, the tricks on top of that are a gift. But good ballet is good ballet. A pas de chat is a pas de chat. And so, yes, there's little differences in syllabi that one syllabi might call a specific arm position a first position, and another one might call it en avant, and another one might call it bras en haute, or there's different names for a few positions. But as dancers, we often, we follow the teacher, what they're doing, and we quickly pick up those little differences. I'd say 90% of ballet terminology is the same wherever you go in the world. It will be the same. And so, first of all, I just wanted to say that for parents, go and look at the school, look at the the whole class. Is the whole class dancing well? Not just the one or two star children who actually would be good at no matter what teacher they went to, because their body is just built for ballet. How is that teacher teaching the majority of the students in that class? Is every student well placed? Is every student got a beautiful classical posture and look? That's also how you're going to judge how is that teacher producing dancers from every student who walks into their door. That's what you're looking for, in my opinion. And that's what happens when you go and audition for a company. When you go and audition for a company, mostly, I'll come back to a few that are slightly different, they're looking at what you can do. Are you a good ballet dancer? They're not looking if you're a good Cicchetti dancer or a good RAD dancer. They're looking at your ballet. And so here again, I'm going to come back. Syllabi is great it's a great tool for a teacher. It makes and helps a teacher be a good teacher for every student who comes into that door. So there are a few exceptions to the rule. Obviously, if you want to get into a Balanchine company, you have to have a little bit of Balanchine. You have to be able to do Balanchine. But I would maybe be cheeky and say that Balanchine is a style. It's not a syllabus. It's a style. And if you've been trained well, if you've got a good classical ballet training, you can add that Balanchine style on. But if you've only been trained in that Balanchine style, you struggle to do other styles of ballet. So in my opinion, it's better to get a more universal classical ballet training, and then you can add different styles. Bournonville is another style that you can add on. So those are two, the Bournonville and the Balanchine, that are very stylistically distinct. The English ballet used to have a style, but I can't tell the difference between them and the Australian ballet and the Canadian ballet and South African ballet. You know, ballet has become so universal, and the companies are all starting to look very, very much alike. And so that's, again, my point of good ballet is good ballet. A good pas de chat is going to be a good pas de chat anywhere you go.
Yeah, for sure.
Make sure you find a teacher who can teach you a good pas de chat. Musically, artistically, beautiful put a bras, beautiful lift, beautiful pointed feet, held of turnout, beautiful controlled landing. It's the detail that goes into the teaching. How much detail does that teacher give when they teach that's going to create a good ballet dancer? That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And especially, like you said, like the companies have all started to look similar. And I think as there's been more diversification into like more contemporary styles of ballet and stuff too, a lot of those kind of like more really individual stylistic companies have started to diversify. So even when you look at some of the Balanchine companies, although they might still do Balanchine classical repertoire, they're often doing contemporary repertoire within the same season. And so they really are just looking for dancers who are good dancers and not necessarily someone who's trained in a specific style, and dancers who can be diverse and can sort of do a lot of different things and adapt to different choreographers and different styles. So that's a really good point. I am aware of the time. I have one more syllabus question that I will ask, and then I have a couple of just kind of rapid fire wrap up questions. So from a teaching perspective, like if you were a teacher and teachers wanted to go out and sort of become certified in a syllabus, and kind of we're looking at, okay, how do I go about doing that? What syllabus, like what should I be looking for in that? Like what is the process nowadays for teachers to go and become certified in a particular syllabi. Like I know back in the day, like you said, like you ended up in ISTD because the studio you were at was ISTD. And I think that that was very common where you kind of just became certified in whatever style or whatever syllabus the studio that you were teaching at was offering. But I'm curious if that's still the case or if there's things that teachers should be looking for if they are interested in becoming certified in a specific syllabus.
Well, I think, the syllabus has to talk to you. That the Imperial Classical Ballet syllabus spoke to me because developed such a beautiful lyrical dancer. I think you also have to find a good mentor. And so sometimes the universe is going to put somebody in your path that is going to mentor you and coach you, and you're going to gravitate to obviously what syllabus they have done. And that certainly happened to me. I will go back to, that off-qual regulation. So what's happened now, if you are say you did your training in Cecchetti and you have a Cecchetti intermediate and you now wanted to teach, you can actually take that intermediate. And when I say Cecchetti, it has to be Cecchetti from the ISTD in London. So I think certain of the Cecchetti groups splintered off into their own, the Cecchetti Canada, Cecchetti USA, Cecchetti Australia. You can go back to London and get your Cecchetti certificate certified through the London Cecchetti branch. And then you can actually do any of your teaching qualifications through the ISTD. You can do it in modern, TAP. As long as you have an intermediate, you have to have an intermediate. And so an RAD intermediate can do the ISTD Imperial Ballet teacher training. So that intermediate is your gateway into any actually of the syllabi, major syllabi. They will ask you to have an intermediate. And you can, as an adult, if you an adult teacher, there's also pathways. I know the ISTD has pathways. They call it applied previous learning, where you can speak to them. Maybe you were a professional dancer, you've taught for so many years, but you would just like a qualification against your name. They have these new pathways that you can send in your documentation, and they might ask you just to do an exam, teaching exam, but they're not going to make you go back and do all the graded exams. And so there are now fast track routes because the dance, any syllabus that is regulated by Ofqual, because they're now regulated, they have these pathways that you can get your applied knowledge looked at, and the learning outcomes all line up, and then you can be fast-tracked into getting a teaching certification.
That's fabulous, because I know in the past it was very if you didn't train in that syllabus growing up, sometimes you'd have to go back and go back to do your intermediate to then be able to go on to do the teaching qualification. So that's amazing that they're recognizing even professional experience and kind of teaching experience and sort of fast tracking people through. So I'm really glad to hear that, because I think that was prohibitive to people in the past where they thought, well, I've already taught for so many years, but I don't have that exam to be able to go on and do the certification. And so teachers were maybe not necessarily getting certified because of that.
Yeah, no, and, if you've been a master teacher, they're not going to make you just do the first teaching level. They're going to invite you to do the fourth teacher level. So they're going to match you to an examination that's going to challenge your current teaching situation. So it's very exciting for teachers right now.
Yes, absolutely. That is fabulous. Thank you so much for all your insight on sort of like the syllabus system and how it works, and specifically like looking into ISTD. I have a few rapid fire questions that I always end the guest podcast episodes with. So I have not told Astrid these questions ahead of time, so they're just going to be first thing that pops into your head. They don't have to be that rapid fire. You can expand on them if you want. But I think I know the answer to this first one, but what's your favorite genre or style of dance?
Oh, classical ballet.
Yeah, I figured, but you never know. I actually, fun fact, before you ever taught me ballet, the first class I ever took with you was acro. So although you then did teach ballet and contemporary, and that is what you are probably most well known for, and what we did the most of with you, the very first class I ever took with you was an acro class back in who knows how long ago. But second question, would you rather be on the stage or in the studio?
In the studio.
If you could dance with or share the stage with any dancer, past or present, who would it be and why, if you have a why?
My best friends. I grew up with 3 wonderful women in the dance studio, and we obviously have lots of memories of shows and competitions together. And wouldn't that be fun to be back on the stage with my 3 best friends who are still my best friends? And yeah, that's who I'd love to be back on the stage with.
Amazing. Second to last question. What's one thing you would go back and tell your younger self as a dancer?
To go slower, to be patient. Because sometimes it takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and to be able to live with that, not to get depressed about it or upset about it or frustrated about it, to breathe and to trust my teacher. It will come. As long as you're doing your best and you're doing the exercises, it will come.
Amazing. And I'm sure that's advice you've given many, many dancers over the years as well. All right. Finally, last question. If there was one thing that you could change about the dance world right now, what would it be?
Definitely, I would change that. I feel that there's a little bit too much focus on competition. And I feel children are being pushed a little bit too much too soon. Too much focus on tricks, not enough focus on the joy of dance, the joy of ballet, the beauty of ballet. So I would change the focus, that there's more appreciation and time. That's that whole thing about time for artistry, for musicality, because that's where the joy lies. That's where the beauty lies. And that's why you keep dancing. So a little bit less on the competitiveness of it and a little bit more of the journey and the joy.
Amazing. I love that. All right. Thank you so, so, so much for joining me. Do you have one more thing you want to say?
One more note to parents. Again, I think a syllabus school is a absolute top-notch. Is the place to start. You know that those teachers at a syllabus-based school, if they're entering exams, those teachers are being examined too. They have to put themselves out there when they put the students in for examinations. Those results are telling you how well their teacher is doing. And so if you trust the teacher at an examination-based school, they're going to work so hard to get those results for your child. And so I think that's also another thing for parents to consider, is that when you put your child in a school that offers an examination through a syllabus, it's not only your child that's going to be examined, it's the teacher as well. So it's a good safeguarding thing to keep in mind, that teacher has to adhere to standards of the society and behaviors of the society. So there's a lot of safeguards that are in there as well when the teacher belongs to a globally recognized examination body.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. Amazing. It's always so fun to talk to you, and I really appreciate all your insight into all the syllabus-based things. If people have more questions or want to reach out or want more information from you, is there a best place to contact you? Or
yes, they can just contact me. On my website, it's Astrid Sherman Catching Art, www.astridshermancatchingart, or I'm on Instagram, Astrid Sherman Catching Art.
Perfect. I will add those in the show notes too. So if people are looking for that website, I'll put it in the show notes so you can reach out.
Yes. And teachers out there, if any of you are interested in ISTD teacher training programs, please write to me. There are lots of wonderful teachers I can connect you to in Canada, USA, Mexico, who could mentor you, coach you, introduce you to the syllabi. And it's so wonderful to be part of a bigger group. There's so much support. It's wonderful.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I've loved catching up and chatting with you today, and it's nice to see your face, even though people can only hear our voices. We've been chatting over video, so it's always nice to see your face, and I really appreciate the time you took to come on the podcast today.
Pleasure, and I think we need to do another research project sometime soon.
All right. Well, we'll get started on that. Sounds good. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.